This is what passes for a classroom. Richard Whitmore's laugh cut through room 214 before anyone could answer. He dragged 2 fingers across the edge of a scarred student desk, glanced at the flickering projector, then turned toward Danielle Carter. Or is this the standard you are comfortable with? The words landed harder than the laughter that followed. 3 parents near the doorway smiled awkwardly. Danielle did not. She stood beside her whiteboard in a navy cardigan, one hand resting on a stack of worn reading books, watching Richard with the controlled stillness of someone who had learned exactly what happened when powerful people expected her to shrink. Above them, fluorescent lights buzzed against the August heat. The old air conditioner rattled in the window but barely moved the warm air. Richard adjusted the silver cuff of his expensive suit and looked around again. He was a major donor to the district, a man whose name appeared on plaques in buildings with polished floors and touchscreen displays. Room 214 had neither. One table leg was balanced on a battered dictionary. Student-made maps covered a cracked section of plaster. A plastic cup held pencils sharpened almost to their erasers. Richard pointed toward it. I was told this school needed investment. I was not told we were touring a storage closet. This time, nobody laughed. Danielle's jaw tightened. It is a classroom, Mr. Whitmore. Clearly. His eyes moved over her slowly, then back to the room, as if both belonged in the same category of disappointment. And you teach here? Every day. Interesting. The word carried no curiosity. At the back of the room, 12-year-old Ethan Whitmore suddenly stopped tapping his sneaker against the floor. Danielle noticed. Richard did not. Ethan had been quiet since his father arrived, shoulders pulled inward, eyes fixed on a bulletin board covered with handwritten cards. Across the top, Danielle had written, "Things we thought we could not do." Richard stepped closer to the board. What exactly am I looking at? Progress. Looks like construction paper. One parent looked down. Another shifted toward the door. Danielle could feel heat gathering beneath her collar, but she kept her voice level. Those belong to my students. Richard pulled one card loose before she could stop him. Read a whole chapter. He gave a short laugh. That is an achievement? Ethan's face strained of color. Danielle crossed the room. Her shoes made 2 soft clicks against the tile. Put it back, please. Richard turned. For the first time, his smile disappeared. Excuse me? The room seemed to contract around them. Even the air conditioner clicked off, leaving only the electrical hum above their heads. Danielle held out her hand. That belongs to a child. Richard stared at her palm, then at her face. You understand my foundation is considering a 6-figure grant to this school? I understand what you asked me. A muscle moved in his cheek. You should also understand that teachers who want support usually know how to speak to the people providing it. Ethan suddenly whispered, Dad. Richard ignored him. He dropped the card onto a desk instead of returning it. The edge caught another sheet of paper, sending it sliding to the floor. Danielle bent and picked it up. The page was covered in uneven handwriting, some letters reversed, several words crossed out so hard the pencil had nearly torn through the paper. At the bottom, one sentence had been rewritten 3 times. I am not stupid. I just learned differently. Danielle's fingers stopped. Behind her, Ethan's chair scraped sharply across the tile. Dad, you need to stop. Every adult turned. Richard's expression hardened. Sit down, Ethan. But you do not understand. I said sit down. Ethan looked at Danielle, panic bright in his eyes. For 1 second, she almost let him speak. Then she gave him the smallest shake of her head. Not yet. Richard saw it. What was that? Danielle folded the paper carefully. Nothing. No. You just signaled my son not to answer me. His voice lowered. What exactly has been happening in this classroom? Before Danielle could respond, firm footsteps approached from the hallway. Principal Margaret Collins appeared in the doorway holding 2 thick folders against her chest. Her eyes moved from Ethan, to the paper in Danielle's hand, to Richard. Mr. Whitmore, she said. Richard turned toward her. Good. Perhaps you can explain why my son is defending this teacher. Collins closed the door behind her. The latch clicked. Actually, she said, placing the first folder on Danielle's desk, I came because you have been asking the wrong question. Richard gave a cold smile. Then enlighten me. Collins opened the folder. Charts, evaluations, and test reports covered the desk. You called room 214 a failure. She looked directly at him. It has the highest student improvement rate in the school. Richard's smile faltered. Ethan lowered his eyes. But Collins was not finished. She slowly placed the second folder beside the first, keeping one hand over the name printed on its cover. Danielle felt Ethan stop breathing behind her. Richard noticed that. What is in that one? He asked. Collins looked at Ethan, then lifted her hand. Richard stared at the name underneath. The color vanished from his face. Why? He whispered. Do you have a file on my son? Richard stared at Ethan's name until the letters seemed to blur. Why do you have a file on my son? Principal Collins did not answer immediately. The fluorescent lights hummed above them, and somewhere beyond the closed door, sneakers squeaked across the hallway tile. Danielle still held the crumpled paper against her chest. Ethan stood behind her, pale and rigid. Collins finally pushed the folder toward Richard. Because Ethan has been in room 214 for 11 months. Richard looked at his son. That is impossible. No, Ethan whispered. It is not. Richard opened the folder. Reading assessments. Progress reports. Attendance logs. Every page carried Ethan's name. His fingers tightened around the paper. You told me this was advanced study. Ethan swallowed. I lied. The admission hit the room harder than a shout. Richard's eyes snapped toward Danielle. You knew? I knew he needed help. And nobody thought his father should be informed? The school contacted your office 6 times, Collins said. Richard froze. Collins slid another page across the desk. 6 dates. 6 messages. 6 responses from an assistant confirming receipt. Richard stared at them, his confidence cracking for the first time. I never saw these. Ethan gave a small, bitter laugh. You never saw a lot of things. Richard turned slowly. What does that mean? Ethan's eyes dropped to the paper in Danielle's hands. The same page Richard had nearly stepped on. Give it to him. Danielle hesitated. Ethan nodded. She placed the page on the desk. Richard read the sentence. I am not stupid. I just learned differently. His jaw tightened. Who wrote this? Silence. Then Ethan raised his hand. Richard looked as if the floor had shifted beneath him. You! Ethan nodded. Last September. The old air conditioner kicked back on with a metallic shudder. Cool air pushed across the room, lifting the corners of the reports. Richard did not move. You can read, he said quietly. Now I can. Ethan's voice trembled. Last year I could barely finish a page without losing my place. Richard looked at Collins, then Danielle. Why did nobody tell me it was this serious? Ethan stepped forward. Because I begged them not to. Richard blinked. Why? Ethan's eyes finally met his. Because every time somebody struggled, you called them lazy. The words stripped the room of sound. Danielle watched Richard's hand flatten against the desk as if he needed something solid beneath it. Ethan continued before fear could stop him. When I got AC in 6th grade, you said Whitmores do not make excuses. So I stopped telling you. Richard opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Mrs. Carter figured it out, Ethan said. She did not laugh. She did not tell me to try harder. She changed how she taught me. Richard glanced toward the battered dictionary supporting the table leg, the handmade cards, the nearly empty pencil cup. Things he had mocked minutes earlier now seemed to accuse him without making a sound. 11 months? He asked. Danielle nodded. 4 afternoons a week at first. You stayed after school with him? With all of them. Richard looked toward the bulletin board. Read a whole chapter. His face changed. That card. Ethan stepped past him and carefully returned it to the spot Richard had pulled it from. Mine! Richard lowered his eyes. The humiliation had reversed, but Danielle felt no satisfaction. She saw something more fragile happening, a father discovering that his son had built an entire hidden life around avoiding his judgment. Richard closed the folder. How much did I miss? Ethan did not answer. Collins did. Enough that you should listen before you decide what this room is worth. Richard's gaze moved to Danielle. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something raw and uncertain. Mrs. Carter. I did not know. Danielle's expression remained calm. That was the problem. Richard absorbed the words without defending himself. Then his eyes caught something beneath Ethan's assessment folder, a sealed district envelope marked confidential. Collins immediately reached for it, but Richard had already seen the return address. What is that? Collins pulled it closer. Not now. Richard's shoulders stiffened. It has my son's name on it. Ethan suddenly looked frightened again. Danielle noticed first. Ethan? He backed toward his chair. Please do not open it. Richard's hand stopped inches from the envelope. The room went still. Why not? Ethan looked at Danielle, then at Principal Collins. Collins exhaled slowly. Because that letter is not about what Ethan could not do. She turned the envelope over, revealing the district seal. It is about what he did after Danielle discovered something everyone else missed. Do not open that letter. Ethan's voice cracked through room 214, and Richard's hand froze above the envelope. For 1 second, nobody moved. The fluorescent lights reflected off Richard's watch while the old air conditioner rattled against the window, pushing warm air over the papers scattered across Danielle's desk. Richard looked at his son. You have been hiding enough from me. Richard, Principal Collins warned. This is Ethan's choice. His jaw tightened. Control was slipping away from him, and Danielle could see how badly he wanted it back. I am his father. Then listen to him like one, Danielle said. Richard turned sharply. The same woman he had mocked 20 minutes earlier was now standing between him and an answer he believed belonged to him. I did not ask for your parenting advice. Danielle held his gaze. And Ethan did not ask to be embarrassed. Silence struck the room. Outside the narrow window in the door, 2 parents had stopped in the hallway. A student lifted a phone before a teacher quietly lowered it. Richard noticed the faces gathering beyond the glass. His cheeks reddened. This has become completely inappropriate. It became inappropriate when you humiliated her in front of everyone, Ethan said. Richard stared at him. Danielle saw the boy's fingers trembling against his jeans, but his voice had changed. He was scared, yet he was finally speaking. Collins picked up the sealed envelope. Ethan, do you want him to know? Ethan looked at Danielle. She gave no signal this time. The decision had to be his. After a long breath, he nodded. Collins broke the seal. Richard expected another intervention report, another document proving how far behind his son had been. Instead, Collins unfolded a letter bearing the district superintendent's signature. 3 months ago, she said, the district invited students from 24 schools to submit proposals for its inclusive learning challenge. Richard frowned. Ethan entered a competition? Not exactly. Collins placed several pages beside the letter. They were covered with diagrams, color-coded reading patterns, and handwritten notes. Richard recognized Ethan's writing immediately. He designed a reading system. Richard gave a disbelieving shake of his head. Ethan? The boy flinched at the surprise in his father's voice. Danielle caught it. So did Collins. Yes, Danielle said. Ethan. Richard looked down again. Danielle moved closer to the desk. He noticed that some students track sentences better when sounds, spacing, and visual cues were organized differently. He started testing ideas on his own worksheets. He is 12. That did not stop him from seeing what adults missed. Richard's eyes narrowed. And you encouraged this? There it was again. Not admiration. Suspicion. Danielle felt the old heat rise beneath her collar. I gave him room to think. Without telling me. He asked me not to. Richard pushed the pages away. So everyone in this room decided what was best for my son except me. Ethan's face fell. Danielle stepped forward before Collins could answer. No. Your son discovered what worked for him. I listened. Richard's voice dropped. You are a classroom teacher, Mrs. Carter. Not a specialist. Danielle did not blink. Correct. Then why should anyone trust your assessment? Collins slowly lifted the final page from the envelope. Because the specialist already did. Richard went still. Collins turned the letter toward him. Ethan's system had been reviewed by the district literacy team. They had tested parts of it in 3 intervention classrooms. The preliminary results were strong enough that Ethan had been selected as the youngest student presenter at the statewide education summit in October. Richard read the paragraph twice. His mouth opened, then closed. He won? He was not trying to win, Danielle said. He was trying to make sure another kid did not feel stupid. Ethan looked down, fighting tears. Richard's gaze moved from his son to Danielle, then toward the bulletin board he had ridiculed. The card reading read a whole chapter suddenly seemed enormous. Behind the door, more footsteps stopped. Richard lowered his voice. Why is your name on this report? Danielle's stomach tightened. Collins looked at her. At the bottom of the district letter, beneath Ethan's name, was another line Richard had only just noticed. Faculty nominee, Danielle Carter. Because Ethan nominated her, Collins said. Richard stared at his son. For what? Ethan wiped his palm against his jeans. Teacher of the Year. Richard almost laughed, but Collins did not. She reached into the folder and removed one last document. That was 3 months ago. She placed it face down on the desk. This arrived this morning. Danielle's breathing changed. She had never seen it. Collins turned the page over. Richard read the first line, and whatever remained of his certainty disappeared. Danielle stepped closer. Margaret, what is that? Collins looked at her, eyes shining. The state made its decision. Danielle Carter has been named Maryland's Teacher of the Year. Principal Collins's words hit room 214 like a power surge. Richard Whitmore stared at the letter, then at Danielle, as whispers erupted beyond the classroom door. A phone camera rose behind the glass. Another followed. Danielle barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on one paragraph beneath the award announcement. Wait. Collins looked at her. What is it? Danielle pulled the page closer. The fluorescent light flashed across the district seal as her finger stopped beside a line of small print. The pilot program. Richard's face hardened. What about it? Danielle looked toward Ethan. They are expanding his reading system to 12 schools next semester. Ethan's mouth opened. Collins smiled. That is incredible. No, Danielle said quietly. Not yet. The room tightened again. Richard gave a humorless laugh. Of course. Even good news becomes a problem in here. Danielle ignored the insult. She flipped through Ethan's evaluation pages, faster now. Paper whispered beneath her fingertips. These results came from 3 intervention classrooms. Reviewed by district specialists, Richard said. Yes. Then what exactly are you questioning? Danielle stopped on a chart. This. Collins leaned closer. Danielle pointed to a column of student outcomes. They measured reading speed and comprehension. They did not separate students by the learning profiles Ethan designed the system around. Richard folded his arms. You are telling us the experts missed something again? His tone made the word experts sound like a locked door. Danielle met his eyes. I am saying Ethan did not create one method. She pulled his handwritten diagrams beside the report. He created 4 pathways. Ethan stepped closer. Mrs. Carter is right. Richard turned. Ethan, let the adults handle this. The boy recoiled as if the sentence had pushed him backward. Danielle saw it immediately. He is the reason we are having this conversation. Richard's voice sharpened. And I am his father. Then stop speaking over him. The hallway went silent. Someone's phone made a soft recording chime. Richard heard it. His eyes flicked toward the door, where donors, parents, and staff were now watching through the glass. His reputation was no longer protected by a private room. You seem very comfortable embarrassing me, he said. Danielle's pulse hammered at her wrist, but her voice stayed even. I am trying to protect the students. From what? From turning Ethan's idea into something it was never designed to be. Collins picked up the district report. Explain. Danielle laid 4 of Ethan's pages across the desk. Colored lines connected symbols, spacing patterns, sound cues, and reading behaviors. Ethan noticed that what helped him confused another student. So he changed it. Then he changed it again for someone else. Ethan pointed to a blue-marked page. That one is for kids who lose their place when the lines feel crowded. Richard stared at him. Ethan touched the green page. That one helps with sound patterns. Danielle looked at Collins. If the district rolls out one standardized version, they could erase the exact thing that made his work successful. Collins's expression changed. Did the literacy team receive all 4 models? Ethan's eyes widened. I sent all 4. Collins searched the report. Once. Twice. Then faster. Only one is referenced here. Danielle felt cold despite the heat pressing against the windows. Richard stepped toward the desk. So call them and fix it. It may not be that simple, Collins said. Why? Because the expansion has already been approved. Richard's phone vibrated. He glanced down, and the color left his face. A message from his foundation's executive director filled the screen. District partnership announcement goes live at 4. His foundation was funding the rollout. Richard locked the screen instantly, but Danielle had seen the logo. Your foundation is paying for this? He slipped the phone into his pocket. That is irrelevant. It is not irrelevant if the program is wrong. Be careful, Mrs. Carter. His voice dropped. You just received the biggest recognition of your career. Do not turn this into an accusation you cannot prove. Danielle stared at him. The old humiliation was back, only now fear sat underneath it. Then let Ethan show us. Richard frowned. Show us what? Ethan moved to the classroom computer. His fingers shook as he opened a folder Danielle had never seen. 4 original models appeared on the screen, each timestamped months before the district pilot. Collins leaned toward the monitor. Ethan, where did you get this version? It is mine. No, Collins whispered. She pointed at the district report, then the screen. Look at the labels. Danielle compared them. Her stomach dropped. Ethan's 4 pathways had been collapsed into one, but several sentences in the district document were nearly identical to his private notes. Richard stared at the screen. Outside, the phones kept recording. Then Ethan opened one final file. I did not send this to the district, he said. Danielle turned toward him. What is it? Ethan clicked. An email appeared, sent from his school account 3 months earlier. Attached were all 4 original models. The recipient was not the district. It was someone inside the Whitmore Foundation. Richard stepped closer, breathing shallowly. Who did you send that to? Ethan looked at his father, frightened now. I did not. Collins read the recipient name aloud. Richard's hand fell from the desk. For the first time, he looked genuinely terrified. That person, he whispered, should not have access to this school. Richard stared at the recipient name as if it had reached through the screen and grabbed him. Caleb Mercer. His voice was barely audible. Principal Collins looked at him. Who is Caleb Mercer? Richard did not answer. Outside room 214, phone cameras remained pressed toward the glass, tiny red recording lights blinking beneath the cold hallway fluorescence. Danielle watched sweat gather along Richard's wrist beneath his silver watch. Mr. Whitmore. Her voice was steady. Who is he? Richard snapped the laptop shut. The crack echoed through the room. Everyone needs to leave. Ethan flinched. Dad? Now. Collins stepped between Richard and the door. Nobody is leaving until you explain why someone from your foundation received a student's private work. Richard's breathing sharpened. You have no idea what you are implying. Then tell us. Danielle's words were quiet. That made them heavier. Richard looked through the glass at the parents filming him. Put those phones away. The cameras did not move. Whispers spread down the hallway. Richard turned back toward Danielle, anger replacing panic. This started because you could not accept a compliment without creating another problem. Danielle felt every eye shift toward her. There it was again. Make her the problem. Make the black teacher too difficult, too suspicious, too unwilling to know her place. I did not create that email, she said. Neither did Ethan. Richard stepped closer. You coached him for 11 months. You had access to his account. Ethan shot to his feet. She did not do this. Stay out of it. No! Ethan's voice broke. The room froze. His hands were trembling, but he moved beside Danielle. You mocked her classroom. You mocked my work. Now you are blaming her because you are scared. Richard's face collapsed for half a second. Then his phone began vibrating again. And again. 3 calls. 5 messages. The Whitmore Foundation logo flashed across the screen. Collins glanced at it. Answer. Richard hesitated, then tapped the speaker. A man's strained voice filled room 214. Richard, do not say anything publicly. The district announcement has been suspended. Richard closed his eyes. Why? Someone found inconsistencies in the pilot documentation. Danielle moved toward the laptop. Ask about the 4 original pathways. Richard glared at her. Not now. Ask him. The voice on the phone went silent. Danielle stopped breathing. Collins noticed. Who is this? She asked. Another pause. Caleb Mercer. Ethan went pale. Richard gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles whitened. Caleb, how did Ethan's files reach you? Richard, we should discuss this privately. Answer me. Outside, the hallway became absolutely still. Caleb exhaled through the speaker. The files came through the Foundation's education portal. Danielle reopened the laptop. Ethan never used that portal. Then someone submitted them for him. Danielle's eyes moved across the email header. Something had bothered her from the beginning. The timestamp. The recipient. The formatting. She clicked the message details, then Ethan's original project folder. Margaret. Collins leaned over. What? Look at the time. Ethan's supposed email had been sent at 3:47 in the afternoon. Danielle pulled up her attendance log. Ethan was with me that day until 5:15. Richard shook his head. He could have sent it from here. Not from his account. Danielle turned the screen. His password had been reset that morning after a security lockout. He could not access email until the next day. Collins stared at the screen. Then somebody else sent it. Richard's confidence finally shattered. Caleb? Silence came through the phone. Danielle clicked one more line in the message header. A routing code appeared. She had seen the same code earlier on the Foundation grant paperwork Richard carried into room 214. The message did not originate from the school, she said. Richard looked at her. It came from your foundation. A gasp moved through the hallway. Richard sank into a student chair, suddenly looking too large for it. The man who had entered room 214 measuring everyone else now could not meet his own son's eyes. Caleb, he whispered. Tell me she is wrong. The speaker crackled. Then Caleb said, Richard, there is something you need to understand about the grant. Danielle's stomach tightened. What grant? Collins asked. Caleb did not answer her. The board needed proprietary material before the funding vote. Ethan's model gave us what we needed. Ethan stared at the phone. You took it? Richard stood so quickly the chair scraped backward. You used my son's work to secure my foundation's deal? It was supposed to help thousands of students. You removed his name. Caleb went silent. That silence answered everything. Richard's face drained of anger, leaving only shock. He looked at Ethan, but Ethan stepped closer to Danielle instead. The movement was small. It devastated him. Then an electronic chime sounded from Collins's computer. A new district email appeared. She opened it, read 3 lines, and stopped. Margaret? Danielle whispered. Collins slowly turned the screen toward them. The district had frozen the entire program pending investigation. But beneath that notice was something worse. Access logs showed that Caleb Mercer had not downloaded Ethan's files himself. Someone with executive-level credentials had authorized the transfer. Richard stared at the authorization code. His lips parted. That is impossible. Danielle looked from the screen to him. Whose credentials are those? Richard did not answer. Ethan did. Dad, he whispered, staring at the code attached to the stolen files. They are yours. Those are your credentials. Ethan's whisper barely crossed room 214, but nobody needed him to repeat it. Richard stared at the authorization code glowing on the laptop. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The air conditioner gave one last metallic shudder, then fell silent, leaving the classroom so still Danielle could hear Richard's phone vibrating inside his jacket. No one reached for it. Beyond the door, the parents who had been recording lowered their phones slightly. Their faces had changed. This was no longer entertainment. Richard slowly sat down. I did not authorize that transfer. Principal Collins kept her eyes on him. The system says you did? Then the system is wrong. His voice was quieter now, stripped of its earlier certainty. Danielle remained beside Ethan. She did not accuse Richard. She did not defend him. She simply reached for the laptop. May I? Richard looked up at her. 20 minutes earlier, he had mocked her classroom. Now every person in the hallway waited for the black teacher he had dismissed to explain what his own foundation could not. Richard nodded once. Danielle enlarged the access log. Lines of timestamps filled the screen. She read them slowly, her fingertip moving down the glass. The authorization happened at 9:42 on March 14th. Richard swallowed. I was in New York that morning. Could you access the foundation remotely? Collins asked. Yes. Did anyone else have your credentials? No. Danielle stopped scrolling. Something was wrong. Not with the code. With the sequence. She pulled Ethan's original email beside the authorization log. The transfer was approved before Ethan's files reached the Foundation portal. Collins leaned closer. How long before? 11 minutes. Richard stood again, but this time there was no anger in the movement. Only confusion. That cannot happen. Danielle looked at him. Exactly. Ethan stepped closer to the screen. How could somebody approve files they did not have yet? No one answered. A phone buzzed in the hallway, then stopped. Danielle opened the metadata from Ethan's project folder and compared the file names. For pathways. For original documents. Then she noticed a fifth file buried beneath them. No student name. No district label. Just a date from 6 months earlier. Danielle's breathing slowed. Ethan, did you create this? He shook his head. I have never seen it. Richard moved beside her. The file contained an early reading framework. Crude. Incomplete. But several labels looked strangely familiar. Collins whispered. That predates Ethan's project. Richard seized on it. Then Ethan did not invent the system. Ethan's face fell. The sentence hit him exactly where Richard's earlier words had. Danielle turned toward Richard. Do not do that. Do what? Decide what something means before you understand it. Richard's mouth tightened, but he stayed silent. Danielle reopened Ethan's handwritten work. She placed his earliest draft beside the mysterious file. For several seconds she only looked. The crowd beyond the glass leaned closer. This older framework has one pathway, Danielle said. It treats every struggling reader the same way. She tapped Ethan's pages. Ethan discovered why that failed. These 4 pathways are his. Ethan looked up. So somebody already had the basic idea? A basic idea is not what made your system work. Danielle opened the properties panel on the older document. Collins's expression changed first. Who created it? Danielle did not answer immediately. The author field contained a name none of them expected. Dr. Laura Bennett. Richard went completely still. You know her, Danielle said. His eyes remained fixed on the screen. She was the Foundation's literacy consultant. Was? She left 2 years ago. Collins frowned. Why? Richard looked toward the hallway, suddenly aware again of every watching face. The board said her pilot failed. Danielle clicked deeper into the document history. A comment appeared beside the original framework. Different learners may require different pathways. Need more classroom data before expansion. Danielle felt a chill move across her arms. She saw the problem. Collins stared at the comment. 2 years before Ethan did. No, Danielle said softly. Everyone looked at her. She suspected it. Ethan proved it. Richard's face had changed completely. For the first time, he looked at Danielle not as an employee, not as an obstacle, but as the only person in the room who could see the pattern forming in front of them. Why would this file be attached to Ethan's account? He asked. Danielle looked back at the access history. That is what bothers me. She followed the metadata trail to an archived server entry. Another timestamp appeared. Then another authorization code. Richard stepped closer. Is that mine too? No. Danielle's voice dropped. Collins read the identifier and went pale. Margaret? Richard asked. She did not respond. Danielle turned toward her. You recognize it? Collins slowly closed her eyes. Yes. The silence deepened. Even Ethan seemed afraid to breathe. Whose is it? Richard asked. Collins opened her eyes. The district superintendent's. Richard stared at her. Outside, the last phone lowered. Danielle looked again at the screen and noticed one final detail. The archived file had been accessed that morning, less than an hour before Richard entered room 214. She turned the laptop toward Collins. Someone knew we were going to find this today. Then Richard's phone stopped vibrating. A second later, Principal Collins's desk phone rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. She looked at the caller identification and did not touch it. Danielle saw the name. So did Richard. The superintendent was calling. The superintendent's name glowed on the ringing phone, and nobody in room 214 moved. Principal Collins finally pressed the speaker button. Margaret, a man said immediately. Close the classroom and stop anyone from recording. Richard's eyes lifted toward the phones beyond the glass. Danielle stayed perfectly still. Why? Collins asked. A pause. Because confidential district material has been compromised. Danielle looked at the laptop. No. It was compromised months ago. Silence answered her. Who is that? The superintendent demanded. Danielle Carter. Another pause, longer this time. Mrs. Carter, this does not concern you. Richard flinched. 20 minutes earlier, he had spoken to her with almost the same dismissal. Danielle's fingers rested beside the keyboard. Then why was Dr. Laura Bennett's archived research accessed this morning, 53 minutes before Mr. Whitmore arrived? The hallway went silent. The superintendent inhaled sharply. You are looking at records you do not understand. Danielle did not raise her voice. Then help me understand the sequence. She turned the laptop so everyone could see. Cold fluorescent light washed across the screen. 2 years ago, Dr. Bennett warned that one reading pathway could not serve every struggling student. Her pilot was labeled a failure. 6 months ago, her unfinished framework appeared inside Ethan's project archive. Richard stepped closer. Danielle continued. 3 months ago, Ethan independently developed 4 pathways that solved the exact weakness Bennett identified. 11 minutes before his work entered the Whitmore Foundation portal, someone pre-authorized its transfer. Collins stared at the timestamps. Using Richard's credentials. Copied credentials, Danielle said. Richard's head snapped toward her. Copied? Danielle enlarged the login record. Look at the authentication method. Richard leaned toward the screen. His breathing changed. My executive account requires a hardware security key. Exactly. Danielle pointed to the entry. This authorization used a legacy password token. Your current account cannot do that. Richard looked stunned. Then it was not me. Not from your current account. Danielle opened an older Foundation document Richard had brought into the classroom. But somebody knew your previous credentials still existed in the district's partnership system. The superintendent's voice sharpened through the speaker. Stop this conversation now. Nobody obeyed. A phone camera rose again outside the door. Then another. Collins's face hardened. Why? Because Mrs. Carter is making accusations without evidence. Danielle clicked once. I have not accused anyone. A server log appeared. I followed the timestamps. The room seemed to lose oxygen. The legacy credential had been reactivated from a district administrative terminal. The terminal identification matched the superintendent's office. Richard whispered, My name was used to authorize it. Danielle nodded. That is what the record shows. And Ethan's work? Moved through your foundation, stripped down, then attached to a rollout that made it look like institutional property. Ethan stared at the floor. Richard's face twisted with shame. All this time, I thought you were trying to embarrass me. Danielle looked at him. I was trying to stop them from doing to Ethan what you did to this classroom. Richard absorbed the sentence without fighting it. Outside, one of the parents who had laughed earlier lowered her eyes. Another quietly removed his phone from the glass. The superintendent spoke again. Richard, your foundation stands to lose millions if this partnership collapses. Think carefully about who you trust right now. Richard looked at Danielle. The woman he had called inadequate. The teacher he had threatened with his money. Then he looked at Ethan, standing beside her instead of him. I think that is exactly what I am doing, Richard said. He reached into his jacket and removed his foundation identification card. He placed it on Danielle's desk. The rollout stops today. The superintendent's voice rose. You cannot make that decision unilaterally. Watch me. A stunned murmur moved through the hallway. Richard's phone began exploding with notifications. Board members. Attorneys. Foundation executives. He silenced it without looking. Then Collins's computer chimed. Danielle turned toward the screen. A new message had arrived from an unfamiliar address. Subject, Laura Bennett. Collins opened it. There was only one sentence. If Danielle Carter found the 4 pathways, she needs to see what they buried. An attachment sat beneath it. Richard went pale. Who sent that? Collins checked the address. Her expression changed. Laura Bennett. Ethan stared at her. I thought she disappeared. Danielle moved toward the computer, but Richard suddenly whispered, Wait. Everyone looked at him. His eyes were fixed on the attachment's file name. I have seen that name before. Danielle's hand stopped above the trackpad. Where? Richard swallowed. The arrogance was gone now. So was the anger. What remained looked almost like fear. On the document my board made me sign the week Laura Bennett was fired. Danielle clicked the attachment. A scanned agreement filled the screen. At the bottom were 3 signatures. Laura Bennett's, the superintendent's, and Richard Whitmore's. Ethan looked at his father. Richard stared at his own signature, as if seeing it for the first time. Then Danielle scrolled to the clause directly above it. Richard read 6 words and sank slowly into the chair. Oh God! Collins leaned closer. Danielle's eyes hardened. The agreement did not merely bury Bennett's research. It transferred ownership of anything derived from it to the Whitmore Foundation. And beside Richard's signature was a handwritten amendment nobody had noticed before. Danielle zoomed in. The handwriting was unmistakable. Richard looked at Ethan, his voice breaking. "Son, I think this started with me. This started with me." Richard's confession barely carried across room 214, yet it changed the way everyone looked at him. The fluorescent light caught the moisture gathering in his eyes as he stared at his signature beneath the ownership clause. Ethan did not move toward him. That hurt more than anything Richard could have been told. Danielle remained beside the desk, calm, one hand resting near Ethan's for original pathways. Outside the glass, phones were still recording, but the whispers had disappeared. Richard touched the handwritten amendment on the screen. "I signed this 2 years ago." Principal Collins studied him. "Did you know what it did?" "I knew the board wanted control of Bennett's research." He swallowed. "I told myself it was normal legal protection." Danielle looked at him. "And the amendment?" Richard shook his head. "I never saw it." Collins enlarged the handwriting. The amendment extended ownership to future work derived from Bennett's framework. That single sentence could let the Foundation claim Ethan's system as its own. Richard's phone vibrated again. He ignored it. "I cared about getting the partnership approved," he said. "I did not ask who could get hurt." Ethan finally looked at him. "Like today?" Richard's face tightened. "Yes." The answer came without defense. "Like today." The hallway remained perfectly still. One of the parents who had laughed at Danielle earlier stepped away from the glass, shame spreading across her face. Richard turned toward Danielle. "I walked into your classroom, saw broken furniture, and decided I understood you." Danielle said nothing. "Then when you challenged me, I assumed you were the problem." His voice weakened. "Even when you were protecting my son." Danielle's expression stayed steady. Richard glanced toward the phones. "Open the door." Collins hesitated, then did. The hallway filled the doorway, parents, teachers, staff, 2 Foundation representatives who had arrived during the chaos. Richard stepped into full view. His expensive suit suddenly seemed less important than the student chair behind him. "What I said about Mrs. Carter was wrong." Nobody spoke. "I judged her classroom by what it cost. I judged her authority by the job title on the door. And when she saw something I did not, I tried to make her doubt herself instead of questioning myself." Danielle felt every face turned toward her. She did not smile. She did not need to. Richard continued. "Danielle Carter protected these students when people with more money, more credentials, and more influence failed to listen." One of the Foundation representatives lowered his eyes. A parent slowly stopped recording. Then another. Ethan watched his father with an expression Danielle could not read. Richard turned back toward her. "Tell me what fixes this." It would have been easy to ask for new desks, a new projector, a renovated classroom with her name on the wall. Danielle looked instead at Ethan's 4 pathways. "First, Ethan keeps ownership of his work." Richard nodded immediately. "Done. Not just Ethan." Richard paused. "Explain." "Dr. Bennett gets credit for what she created. Ethan gets credit for what he created. Every student involved in future testing gets protection. And no rollout happens until educators who actually work with these children review all 4 pathways." Collins's eyes softened. Danielle continued. "And room 214 does not get special treatment because cameras are standing outside today." She pointed toward the hallway. "There are classrooms like this across the district." Richard looked down. The 6-figure grant he had once used as leverage suddenly had somewhere more meaningful to go. "All of them," he said. Danielle studied him. "That is not an apology." "I know." His voice dropped. "It is a beginning." Ethan's shoulders loosened slightly. "Not forgiveness." "Not yet." But something had moved. Collins's computer chimed again. Everyone turned. Another message from Laura Bennett had arrived. This one contained no documents. Only a short note addressed directly to Danielle. Collins read it silently, then stepped away from the screen. You should read this yourself. Danielle approached. The cold monitor light washed across her face. The message said that Laura had followed Ethan's work from a distance, and knew someone had finally understood what her original research was missing. Then came the final sentence. Danielle read it twice. Richard watched her expression change. What did she say? Danielle did not answer. She looked at Ethan instead. The boy moved beside her and read the sentence over her shoulder. His eyes widened. She wants us to meet her. Richard stepped closer. Where? Danielle scrolled down. There was an address, a time, and one final request: bring Ethan's original notebook. Ethan immediately looked toward his backpack. His face changed. Danielle noticed. What? Ethan opened the bag and searched once, then again, faster. Books hit the desk. Pencils rolled across the floor. Ethan? Danielle asked. He looked up, suddenly pale. My notebook was here this morning. The last phone in the hallway lowered. Richard stared at the empty backpack. Danielle looked toward the classroom door, remembering how many people had passed through room 214. Ethan's voice fell to a whisper. Someone took it. Someone took it. Ethan's whisper emptied the room of sound. Danielle looked at the open backpack, then at the hallway where parents, donors, and staff had finally lowered their phones. Richard reached for his own phone, but Danielle gently stopped him. Wait. She crouched beside Ethan's desk and studied the floor. A torn strip of blue paper rested beneath the radiator. Ethan recognized it immediately. That is from my notebook. Danielle followed the scattered scraps toward the reading corner, where a battered plastic storage bin sat beneath the bulletin board. She lifted the lid. The notebook was inside. Ethan exhaled so sharply his shoulders shook. Nothing had been stolen. One of the younger students had borrowed it earlier to copy Ethan's color system and returned it to the wrong place. Richard closed his eyes. For the first time all afternoon, the danger disappeared without another enemy appearing behind it. Danielle handed the notebook back to Ethan. Your work stays with you. He held it against his chest. Richard watched the gesture, then quietly removed his foundation badge from his jacket. He set it on the desk beside Danielle's nearly empty pencil cup. Tomorrow morning, my attorneys will release every claim the Foundation has on Ethan's work and Dr. Bennett's research. Collins studied him. And the district investigation? Continues. Richard looked toward the ownership agreement still glowing on the computer. Including my part in it. No excuse followed. No request for forgiveness. Danielle noticed that more than any apology he had made. Outside the windows, late afternoon sunlight had softened from white to amber, stretching across the scratched tile and turning dust into tiny sparks. Richard walked toward the bulletin board. His eyes found the card he had marked earlier. Read a whole chapter. He touched its corner but did not remove it this time. Ethan. His son looked up. Richard struggled for words. I should have known this mattered. Ethan's fingers tightened around his notebook. You can know now. Richard nodded. It was not absolution. It was better. It was a door left unlocked. Then he faced Danielle. I owe you more than an apology. Danielle shook her head. You owe him your attention. Richard looked at his son. The answer landed quietly. Yes. The next morning, room 214 looked exactly the same. The projector still flickered before warming up. The dictionary still supported the uneven table leg. The air conditioner rattled like loose change whenever it started. But at 7:30, Richard Whitmore appeared at the doorway without a suit jacket, without Foundation representatives, and without cameras. In his hands were no ceremonial check and no oversized donation sign. Just a cardboard box. Danielle looked inside. Pencils. Notebooks. Reading overlays. Headphones. Ordinary supplies from the list posted outside her classroom. The district can handle the larger funding correctly, Richard said. I thought I could start with what you actually asked for. Danielle studied him for a moment, then stepped aside. Supply cabinet is in the back. Richard carried the box himself. When students arrived, nobody told them what had happened the day before. They only noticed that Ethan's 4 pathways were now displayed beside the reading wall with his name beneath them. Underneath was a second card, based in part on early research by Dr. Laura Bennett. No foundation logo appeared anywhere. At 9:15, Principal Collins entered carrying an envelope. She handed it to Danielle without ceremony. Inside was the official Teacher of the Year confirmation and a handwritten note from the superintendent's interim replacement. The expansion had been suspended. An independent review had begun. Dr. Bennett had agreed to return as an outside advisor, with Ethan and Danielle included in every discussion about future testing. Danielle folded the letter once and placed it in her desk drawer. Then she went back to teaching. Richard watched from the hallway. Yesterday, he had stood in that same spot believing money made him the most important person in the building. Now 23 children were leaning toward Danielle while she moved between their desks, adjusting a page here, lowering her voice there, noticing what each child needed before they had to ask. Ethan raised his hand. Danielle called on him. He read aloud from a book he once could not finish. One paragraph. Then another. His voice stumbled on a word. He stopped. Richard instinctively leaned forward. Ethan sounded it out and continued. Nobody laughed. Danielle did not rescue him. She simply waited. When Ethan finished the page, Richard lowered his eyes, fighting an emotion he no longer needed to hide. Before leaving, he noticed a blank card beneath things we thought we could not do. He picked up a pencil, wrote something, and pinned it to the wall. Danielle saw it after the final bell. Admit I was wrong. No signature. None was needed. She looked through the doorway. Richard and Ethan were walking down the hall together, slower than before, Ethan talking while his father listened. Danielle switched off the classroom lights. The fluorescent hum disappeared. Evening sunlight remained, warm across the old desks, the repaired books, and 23 handwritten victories on the wall. Her Teacher of the Year letter stayed hidden in the drawer. Ethan's card stayed where everyone could see it. Danielle closed the door softly behind her, and room 214 fell silent at last, not because power had won, but because nobody inside it needed to prove their worth anymore.